There we go. Good morning and welcome to another episode of Raise the Bar. I'm your host, Troy Haynes, former high jumper at UCLA and now long time coach. And I'm very lucky to have with me today Chloe Timberg. She is from the East Coast. She's a growing star on Instagram. I saw you have a lot of people watching you vault, a lot of high energy stuff. You look just like a kick to follow. And we're just talking here a little bit, and Chloe gave me some of her background. And it's funny that you mentioned this because your background is in gymnastics, you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I've had the opportunity to work and train with, kind of watch his process with Anthony Curran out here on the West Coast, great UCLA vaulter, and has a lot of, it's just a huge thing out here where we were at CIF finals a couple of years ago, and I asked him how many people were his, and out of 40 something kids, I think he was coaching over half of them. So he knows his stuff. And we were talking about the whole gymnastic, thing. He says, yeah, I want the gymnasts and the acrobats. I was like, so having done just a little bit of vaulting, enough to make me slightly dangerous as a coach, I realized the importance of all that. So Chloe, thank you for taking time out to be with us here. You're 3 hours behind, so I know I'm cutting into your afternoon.
No, no, no. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk a little bit.
Awesome. So how is everything going out there at Rutgers? You guys are I'm imagining it's starting to get a little colder now. We have actually, for the last 2 weekends, I've watched your football team play ours. With
Yeah,
UCLA
yeah.
managed to
They've been
get their first
fighting.
Big Ten win against you guys, and then last night you guys ran into SC. So that might not
Yeah.
have been their best weekend out on the West Coast for the football
hmm
team. But
Yeah.
so you're a Scarlet Knight. Where exactly is Rutgers? My wife and I were looking at that Big Ten ad, and they start on the
hmm
West Coast now, and they travel
Yeah.
all the way to the East Coast. I'm like, okay, where is Rutgers?
Yeah, Rutgers is right in New Brunswick, New Jersey. So it's about like 45 minutes from the coastline, a little bit further inland, but kind of
Mhm.
like north central Jersey area.
Okay, and then you're from Pennsylvania, you said,
Yes.
and then
Yep.
so I'm imagining lifelong Steeler fan, or is that jumping the gun?
I'm not, I don't watch a ton of sports. My family never really introduced me to that. I didn't grow up watching them, but
Yeah.
like typical Phillies, Flyers. So
Okay. Yeah, I know that's the toss up in the area, right? It's either
yeah, yeah.
Mets, Yankees if you're in New York, and then it's
hmm
you know for either football it's Giants or Jets. So in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, it's got to be Steelers or Eagles, right? And
Yep. 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 Those are two
baseball's
big
probably
ones.
does the same, Pirates or Phillies, yeah.
Yes,
So you got
definitely.
the East Coast bias back there, which is cool. The one thing I've noticed, of course, the jump you sent me was you training indoors.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing for me that it's so weird. I know it's probably weird for you guys out there because on the West Coast, there's literally almost no indoor facilities ever. Like
Yeah.
unneeded, unused, unwanted. It's like you just go down the list. It's like the weather's so nice that even in the
hmm
winter, it's going to be dry and
Yeah.
not cold enough to where you don't have, worry about anything or whatever. If it does rain, it's probably not going to rain all day. But if it does, yeah, you might lose a day or here too. But it's really, there's no drive to compete indoors. So
Yeah.
when I see indoors, I'm always like, God, that looks so cool to just be able to go indoors if you need to. And then, of course, for you guys, you need to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, it's been getting a little chilly here. It was weird. It kind of dipped down for a little bit and then it warmed back up. So we moved everything indoors, anticipating that it was gonna stay cold. And now it's like we probably could have stayed outdoors, but there was definitely a week or two there where it was, we woke up for practice and it was probably about 44 degrees out. So
yeah,
yeah, it was a little,
that makes it nice. Yeah,
yeah,
my
yeah.
big idea for indoor for the high jump is to move the pits indoors onto the basketball court and then
hmm
jump in tennis shoes. I'm
Yeah,
actually
there you
trying to put
go.
together a meet like that because I've seen it
Get
on
creative.
my feed. That's what I follow. All my hashtags are high jump, long jump, triple jump,
hmm
pole vault, anything to do with any of those trainings, speed, power, all that stuff just is a constant stream, through my stuff. And then, the athletes that I follow like you. So if I see you all of a sudden pop up, I'm like, oh, what's Chloe up to? So it's like, okay, she's jumping over something again. And then that's the fun part for me is just seeing how everybody keeps getting better and all that. So You were telling me now that when you started in high school, I find this interesting because this comes up a lot for me as a coach. I work a lot with high school kids and getting them to the next level, right? How do you get to the next level? Like who do you know? Who's recruiting your kids? Blah blah blah. And what you told me, I found really fascinating because you basically recruited yourself, right? You were pushing yourself towards these other coaches, saying, hey, I really like this. I enjoy this. I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna vault really high. And they're like going, like you said, they're like, well, we'd really like somebody in the mid 13s to high 13s and blah blah blah. And you're like, yeah, but that's coming. Just
Yeah.
take me. I'm Chloe. I'm good. I'm gonna rock it for you. And they're like, yeah. And it's so funny to me because these schools, even still here in the U.S., I'm like, look, you can get people to walk on. I walked on at
Mhm.
UCLA. They didn't have to pay me a penny. Now I know you were looking for a scholarship, so that was a little bit different. I also wanted to be on scholarship, but I was like, I didn't want to go somewhere that I didn't want to be. And I'd always
Mhm.
like thought about track. I wanted to go to UCLA. When I got to my senior year, I'm jumping like 6'10", and I'm thinking that's really good. I get to UCLA, I'm number 7 on the depth chart, and they literally told me, we don't have any money for you. You can walk in and you can walk on. We'll get you in the school, and that's about it. If you want to make
Mhm.
your way after that, you can make your way. And I
Yeah.
asked the coach the first day, I said, well, what do I have to jump to get on scholarship? And he kind of chuckled, he goes, and he's like, oh, you're serious? Okay, well, if you jump 7'2", we'll talk,
Yeah.
And so my sophomore year, I jumped 7'2", and I was sitting in his office that following Monday. So you go ahead and push and you jump 14'2" by the time your senior year is over, but you'd already signed your deal with Rutgers, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
that
that's
was
correct.
your big opportunity. Now they had the vision to
Yeah.
give you a chance, and you improved already before you got to them. So how was that transition from college to, or from high school to college, when you did finally make the jump? Because that is a D1 school, right? And it's big time. So you go from high school. How'd you do? And say, take us to your high school state meet. How'd you do there?
Ooh, high school. So I believe it was senior year. I did end up winning states, but up until that point, I really was kind of known to underperform at those meets. There were
Uh-huh.
definitely a lot of state meets that I remember walking away from saying, man, like I know that that's nowhere close to what I could have done. And so I think that that definitely is a little bit discouraging when you underperform in your own eyes. But unfortunately, you kind of just have to get back out there and you have to keep trying. And if it doesn't quite line up in high school, it is what it is. And you kind of just continue on to college and yeah, again, you just keep trying. But yeah, all those meets really, like, I don't think I did really well at nationals any of the times that I went in high school. States was another big one that I kind of, had trouble performing at, but yeah.
So then, but your senior year, you turn it all around and you win now, right? So now you're on a heater. You're heading into college. You're now a state champ. And this is another interesting question to me, just because I'm always comparing my experience to someone else's. When I went to UCLA, all I'd heard was UCLA, UCLA. And Dell Davis, who was a junior, had just come in second at the NC2A finals by jumping 7'7" and a quarter, which is
Mhm.
outrageous, right? I jumped 6'10". I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, he gets an article in Sports Illustrated. I'm reading along, and Dell Davis has a quote, and then he's talking to his coach, Bob Larson. So I'm hearing all these names. And when I get to UCLA, and no discredit to Bob, who's a fantastic coach, won national championships, and was a great distance coach. He walks up to me, shakes my hand, he says, "Hi, I'm Bob Larson." He goes, "I'm working with the high jumpers," and he goes, "And I don't know anything about the high jump." That's the first words out of his mouth. And I'm like, "Oh, great."
He's
so
honest with you.
so exactly what am I going to be doing then? It's like, well, you're going to be working with Dell and Lee. Well, Dell jumped 7'7", Lee jumped 7'4" at that time. And, it's like, okay, well, these guys know what they're doing, I guess. And, I'm off. So that was 2 years of training with those two guys without a coach actually looking over you to say, here's what you need to be doing technically. And I'm a technician minded person. So that was difficult. So what, other than the fact that Rutgers was willing to give you a chance, had you had a chance to, look and see, did they have success? Did they have a really good pole vault coach that you looked forward to working with? How did that factor into your decision?
Yeah, so I think that we both kind of took a shot in the dark on each other. Because at the time, like Rutgers didn't really have a big pole vault program. You know, if you're in high school and you're looking at a very competitive school, you know, a lot of times like your first thing is to go to the school rankings and say, okay, like, you know, these schools are in top 20, these schools are in top 50. Um, and I think at the time, like I didn't really have that information, you know what I mean? Like I was kind of looking at schools myself. My high school coach was helping, my club coach was like he knew a couple people, so like he kind of directed me towards some coaches that he thought would be a good fit. But no, when I committed to Rutgers, I think they had two guys and one girl. The one girl actually, I believe, transferred to UCLA. So she was jumping there the past 2 years, I think. So it was a very, very small group. And kind of what they told me was, hey, like this is going to be a developmental program. You know, we want to bring people in. We want to start from scratch and just kind of build the program up to be that formidable force in the Big Ten. So it was kind of interesting to me, and I feel like that was part of why I chose Rutgers because I wanted to be a part of something where we were both just kind of like learning and trying to build each other up and make it to where we knew we could be. So yeah, I think that plays a really big part in actually our team culture at Rutgers. It's just kind of like knowing that we've come a really, really long way and we haven't always been like this big force in the Big Ten, but in the last couple of years we have been improving and we've been getting better and kind of like living up to what we know we can do, you know?
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So, how long now? I didn't get any of that information. What year are you in at Rutgers,
Mhm.
and what are your kind of your goal sets for this season, let's say?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm in my senior year, almost done. I'm studying exercise science, so I'll wrap up that degree in the spring. Um, but I think as far as goals, I don't like to focus so much on like specific heights because I think that causes me to get really in my head. You know what I mean? Then I think that it causes me to put a lot of pressure on myself as well, which
Hmm.
takes away from kind of my enjoyment of the sport. So I don't like to say like, hey, my goal is 15.6 this year. I kind of just like to take it meet by meet and say like, hey, you know, I did this really, really well, but this other thing that I've been working on in practice didn't quite show up. So I almost try and make like technical goals as we go throughout the season and kind of have like a checklist that I go down through and say like, okay, like, you know, step one, I want to see, you know, like an earlier plant. And, you
Hmm.
know, once that starts showing up, like I consider that goal kind of like checked off my list. And then, you know, like another one might be, okay, like I want to see myself drop my shoulders a little bit better in the jump. So kind of creating those technical goals, I think gives you more manageable like stepping stones as opposed to, okay, you know, I want to jump 16 feet this year because that's kind of jumping from like point A to point Z versus like A, B, C, D, and
Right.
so forth to that larger goal. So I think it makes it a lot more manageable in my head and it kind of prevents me from, you know, melting down under the pressure. So.
Right. Okay. So you came in to Rutgers with a personal best of 14.2 after winning the state and all that. So how high are we up to now?
This past season I jumped 15.5, so 471.
Okay. And where would that have been for US trials last year?
Yeah, so 471 I believe would have made it. So we did progression was a little bit different than it was at nationals. So because I was the only winner at nationals, I got to kind of choose where I put the bar. So that's why you see like a 471 mark as opposed to a 470. But at trials, I believe we went 465, 475. So had I cleared like kind of equivalent to my PR or just a couple centimeters higher, that would have been the third spot on the team. But you know, obviously I didn't quite make that jump at the trials. I was still really happy with how I performed though. You know, it was my first kind of like big meet and I think that I was just happy with how I fought for it. You know, I made a lot of attempts on third make. So just from like a mental standpoint, I was really proud of how I competed, even if the height wasn't quite there.
Yeah. Well, hey, get this is you don't know this because you haven't listened to the podcast. I was, 7'3.5", my
Mhm.
senior year in '86.
Yeah.
So in '84, the Olympic trial qualifying height was like 7'4.25", and I
Hmm.
just jumped 218, which is, 7'4.25" is like 225 or six or something like that,
Okay.
somewhere in there, 224. So I had to go up 6 centimeters, right, in that one year.
Hmm.
But I had just that year was the first time I jumped over 7 feet. I had just jumped 7 feet, then I jumped 7.2, and I was like
Mhm.
taking decent jumps at 7.3 or 4, but
Yeah.
I wasn't quite getting over. But it wasn't in my world view even that you're just this far away from making the Olympic trials.
Yeah. Yeah.
Before that year,
Definitely.
like I said, I wanted to get on scholarship. I just wanted to jump seven
Mhm.
two. So, it's interesting. You brought up the thing about the height and being limited. I think in some ways, when I jumped 7.2, I was like almost done. Like, I'm like, hey, I
Yeah.
jumped 7.2. And
Mhm.
I didn't have an additional goal set. Like, I didn't have the goal of doing well at Pac 10s, the
Yeah.
now defunct Pac 10 and 12, which is now gone. But, making it there. And when I think it was Pac 10s when I was in it, but getting there was I had the mark. Competing at that was one thing, but winning or whatever, not even in my I hadn't thought about
Yeah.
that, and nationals was still at 7.3 1/2, so I wasn't quite
Mhm.
there. But I was kind of happy, I jumped 7.2, I was got a scholarship. So that was 1984. And I didn't realize, like I'm looking back now, I'm like, you moron. 84, 84, the Olympics is going right through Los Angeles, like in
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
backyard. Like, so now I'm older, I have all this experience, but it's like I kept trying to make the trials and I couldn't get there. So you're talking about it like, oh, I didn't jump as well as I wanted to, but I like the experience and everything. I'm like, you went to the Olympic trial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
No,
I'm
I
so
do. I have to
jealous.
remind myself
Yeah.
sometimes because I think I did have that initial disappointment of like, oh man, like I really felt like I could have done it. But then, I took a step back and I was like, okay, like you're 21, you have more time to get back out there and improve and try again. So it was just important to me to not be too tough on myself. But
Yeah. Well, so you went to the trials, like I had said, how does it compare? And you went right to, you were competing in it and with another maker, so you're on the team. So what place did you finish in? And, like 5 centimeters in the pole vault is not a whole lot, right? So, or 10, you guys go up by tens, right?
it
Usually.
depends on where you are in the meet. Sometimes we like because we'll usually start at 15 and then it drops down to 10, drops down to 5. So depending
Okay.
on how far you are into the progression, yeah,
Yeah,
it
they do
might
the
drop
same in the
like
high
5.
jump. It goes like
Yeah.
5, 4, 3. Yeah. Okay. So,
Yeah.
and then you are within a height or so. So that's awesome. And as a junior in college, now how many other collegiate jumpers were there with you?
There were, I'm not quite sure the exact number, but there were definitely a couple girls. You have the Mall twins. So I think they finished fifth and sixth, and I believe I finished seventh. But
Mm.
we cleared the same height. It was just kind of a matter of makes and
Yeah.
misses at that point. They were a lot cleaner throughout the meet versus like I think I made maybe 2 to 3 of my bars on my last attempt. So
Yeah.
it's definitely not my cleanest meet.
Just kept toughing it
Um,
out though. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But we had a couple other girls too. So I would say there was anywhere from like 6 to 7, maybe.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
There were a lot of familiar faces because we had just gotten done nationals not too long
right.
ago. So it was kind of funny to come from nationals and then it was like, oh, like half the field is
Yeah.
they're all people that I've seen before. So
You've seen them. Yeah. That's cool. So you're still working with your college coach only, or was there actually even a national level coach? Like, I don't even know how this works anymore because I know they still have the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs.
Mhm.
And I
Yeah.
think there's guys that are in charge of all those things, but you kind of have to be there, right? To work at the Colorado Springs or something. Like, they're not going to come to
Mhm.
you. It's a big country,
Yeah.
right? So you're just still working with your college coach. Do you do any other work with anybody else?
So it's predominantly with my college coach just because I think that like when you're kind of caught up in the schedule of college classes, because I have class every day, sometimes for like 3 to 4 hours. So you kind of have to be on campus. You don't have a ton of flexibility in where you can go. Maybe on like the weekends, like most weekends I'll come home and I'll visit my family. But no, definitely staying close to campus. I did a ton of work with him, jumping. Sometimes I would do my sprint work with like our head coach he oversees like sprints. We also have a really good like long jump, high jump coach. So for like the run mechanic stuff, a lot of times like if I need a second set of eyes, I'll go to him because I think that
Right.
he specializes a little bit more in that.
Yeah.
Whereas my pole vault coach is like predominantly just the pole vault stuff. So if I want eyes on my running, it's either like the head sprints
Yeah.
coach or that jumps coach. And then I definitely do. I would go back and get advice from my club coach as well, my former club coach, just because I think it can be really beneficial to kind of get a fresh set of eyes and a different perspective. Because maybe one cue that someone uses might not work for you versus like maybe another coach is giving that same cue and they can just kind of help reframe the
Right.
wording of it a little bit more. So I think in that sense it is nice to kind of have some diversity in your coaching, but
Yeah.
I wasn't really training at any alternate locations. It was Rutgers, and then my college coach has a vault club in his backyard. So like sometimes I would go to his house and we would
Yeah.
vault there instead of at the
Yeah.
university if it worked out better. So
Okay. So looking ahead now, we've got the Olympics are coming back to Los Angeles,
yes.
right? So however many years from 84, I can't do the math. It would have been 40 this year, so it's gonna be 40
Yeah.
years. So it's coming to LA. Is that in your thought process? Because you're going to graduate here and you're going to have kind of
Yeah.
almost the perfect storm kind of the
hmm
wrong way, because now you're out of college. Now you still be able to hang around at college. You're going to go to graduate school. Like what do you see for the next few years?
Yeah, so initially I was planning on doing a graduate program. Like my coming out of last year, our initial plan was to redshirt me for all of this year and then come back for a fifth year, use up my eligibility and also start a graduate program. But I feel like I'm kind of at the point where I really want to devote most of my time to pole vault and really kind of like give it my best shot at making it to 2028 in LA. Um, and I was also just kind of honest with myself too. I don't think that I've ever been much of a school person. Like I really, really enjoy exercise science. I like the hands-on aspect of it, but I think the sooner that I can be in like kind of like a hands-on environment where I'm coaching people or, in some type of like high school sports performance training, like I think that's gonna fit me a little bit better than staying in and doing a grad program. And so I guess for now, grad school is going to kind of be put on hold, but I do plan on some point maybe going to do like a GA position where I intern at a strength and conditioning department. So that way,
Right.
like post vaulting, I can go back and work with collegiate athletes in the strength department. Um, but no, so I'm planning on putting that on hold. So once I graduate, I'm going to be kind of training full time. I have a sports performance coaching position set up kind of in my hometown. So I do plan on going back to my hometown and hopefully going back to my club coach because I think that that's going to be a really, really good fit. And I'm excited for that. 'Cause,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, I never really understood any of that until I started going through it. So,
Mhm.
and I'm impressed with you, but I think this the way that my brain works is like I didn't have anybody in my family that had even gone to college, and so
Yeah.
nobody had been an athlete in college. Nobody had done any of those things, and so I would just kind of go along, And I sometimes I think the more talented you are, the higher you jump, and I think some people will probably steer you and go, "Hey, you should be doing this." And there was a little bit of that, but there was never anybody that came up and said, "Hey, let me take you under my wing and show you how to do this." It's like
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like anybody did that with you. You're just smart enough to ask questions. Like I was just going along, going, "Well, I knew what the heights were, and I knew what I had to jump to try to get to certain places." And
Mhm.
like I didn't have a plan for my after graduation with my degree. I have a
Yeah.
kinesiology degree, and the thing that everybody used to ask me was, "Do you want to be a trainer?" And what they meant by trainer was, being in taping ankles and all that, which I find incredibly valuable, but it was not
Yeah.
me. I'm not going to be
It's,
an ankle taping guy. I'm the guy that's interested about how fast you're running, what angle you're leaning at. Like I'm more about biomechanics and, explosive performance and, how do you
Mhm.
get that, all the power stuff that's going on now. I love it. I find that so fascinating. So speed, agility, hand-eye coordination, all those things.
Yeah.
And, that wasn't going to be me. So I got out of college and I was like, well, I don't really want to do that. And I didn't have any vision. Like I wish after now having embarked on this whole coaching journey, like I didn't graduate till 88 and I went in 89, I started coaching at junior college,
Mhm.
$2,500 stipend for the season, and you think about that now, I mean, it's almost the same pay now. 40 years
Yeah.
later, it's the same. You can't make any money coaching
Mhm.
track and field. You have to coach something that
Definitely.
actually brings in money, which I'd like to see happen in this country, but I'm kind of holding my breath. I think I've already turned blue. I'm
Yeah.
waiting. There's not going to be any
Maybe one
money.
day.
You
We're
have to be
getting
really
there.
creative to do that. I learned a lot from Coach Curran because he only charges his athletes like $40 each, and he has 7 of them on the runway for any hour. And there's like
Mhm.
one after the other.
Yeah.
And he'll
Yeah.
just tell them something, do this drill, blah blah blah, get back in line, and here they come. And it's smart because it's $280 an hour, which is nice,
Yeah.
but it's
Like group
like
training.
first you got to have that that presence to be able to come. draw people to you,
Yeah.
and then it's hard in some ways. Like I would like to have that group setting, and I know if I'm standing a little bit farther back in line, I might not even know what he's telling this other person,
Hmm.
because I've got that coaching mind too, where I'm like, I want to know what he's telling everybody, and
Yeah.
not this one person with this one problem. So yeah, I am impressed with your level of foresight and planning ahead, especially coming through at age 21, and then you're going to be coming up to the Olympics. And I mean, 5 years, you'll still only be 26 years old,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
4 years, 25 years old, and you're at your, close to your physical peak. So kudos in thinking through all the angles. And then, so the
Thank you. Thank you.
exercise science is that it's quasi kinesiology, right? I mean, we might as well be talking the same thing.
Yeah, pretty much. I've looked at a lot of different programs and it's like the equivalent to a kinesiology. Sometimes it's called like health studies. I think that
Yeah.
universities have kind of just given it like three
Yeah.
different names, but it's pretty much the same thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, high level performance stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did end up getting my master's a long time later, but
Hmm.
in this exercise science, and Cal State Long Beach had an exercise science. It was kinesiology, but the emphasis was exercise science. So yeah,
Yeah.
real
This is
fun.
it's very med school based at Rutgers. Like I know that we do a lot of like gen ed, so it's a lot of biology, a lot of chemistry, physiology, and then I think that the internship is kind of where you start to narrow in on maybe like the sports
Right.
performance stuff. So not so much
Yeah.
sports performance until like your senior year, which is I guess typical, but very gen ed for a lot.
Yeah, UCLA was the same because of the UCLA
Yeah.
medicine. I mean, it's world renowned,
Hmm.
medical. So it's like if you're going to do anything under the purview of medical there, they're going
Yeah.
to get you. And
Yeah.
yeah, I had to take, I mean, I didn't realize that, I just took it because I don't know, you're so young. You would know I was in 1980, well before you were born. I'm watching some show, or 79, 80, where they were showing these scientists working on, the forces and angles produced in a overhead volleyball swing, and it's
Okay,
just
interesting.
a DOS screen, black, with a green stick figure going like
Yeah.
this,
Yeah.
boom, and they're
The
analyzing,
biomechanical breakdown of it.
yeah, stick and this and that, and no picture, and I'm just like, and I'm like this. I'm like, oh my God, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen. So then I get to UCLA and we're showing pictures on the wall, moving pictures, and you're literally putting the dots yourself on the wall, marking the joint angles. Like
Yeah.
here's the knee, here's the ankle, right? And you're going along, okay, move it a couple frames, and you do it again. You're like, oh, look, there's the center mass going like this, and it's like archaic, right? The stuff that we
Yeah.
used to do.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that, and that got me to where I was like, well, that's what I want to do. I never had a question. I started right off with a declared pre-kinesiology major. And
Wow, that's
through,
nice.
through the pre-kinesiology stuff, which was anatomy, physiology,
Yeah.
2 levels of physiology. The anatomy class was killer because, like I said,
Yeah.
that was under
Hmm.
the
That was my favorite
umbrella
class
of the
by far.
medical.
Loved it.
Yeah. Well, I
We had
took
a
it.
human cadaver actually that we had to
Yeah.
dissect for that. I was like, I was so amazed by that class. That was so interesting to me.
Yeah, it really is. But I was idiotic enough to think that I had anatomy in high school, which I did. And I don't remember doing dissection, but it was like, oh yeah, I got this down. Well, we knew the muscles and the bones and some other stuff. And then,
Insertion points and
oh my God, when we started doing that, I was like, oh, wait a minute, what? You're testing me on, and the questions are like, okay, so you're in this position, right? And you move this way. Are you pronating or supinating using this muscle? I'm like, wait,
yeah,
pronation?
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah.
So it's very information heavy, but
Yeah.
I didn't even know that that's what I was going to end up going into. I actually came in as a biotech major because I had worked in a lab doing hepatitis studies. So
Uh-huh.
I thought I was going to go into biotechnical studies, but didn't.
Wow.
Didn't.
Another lucrative area. The
Yeah,
sports stuff is caught up. It definitely is
yeah.
caught up. I see it as huge business just because of the fact that, football rules the roost, but you still
Hmm.
get baseball, basketball, everything else. But it's like, you're paying these athletes literally just millions and millions of dollars. And like, I'm a 49er.
Even the coaches
Oh,
too.
I mean, everybody's making money, but it's like these athletes are making money, the teams are making the money. In the
Hmm.
NFL, they're sweating out money. It's like
Yeah,
they're getting paid $400 million a year, each team, for their share of the TV contract. just straight
Yep.
up. You could be the worst team in the league, and the NFL is handing you a check for 400 million. The salary cap is only 225. So you're going to
Hmm.
clear 175 million dollars, and that's without having your 10 or 12 home games,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And no playoffs and anything else. I mean, they are
Very,
making
very lucrative
so
for
much
them.
money. So you're like, okay, we're paying all that. And then you hear about these contracts. Patrick Mahomes, a few years back got a 10-year, $500 million contract. You're like, oh,
Mm,
making $50 million a year. That's crazy. Now he's
it's
been
insane.
pretty injury free and all that. So you're getting a lot of return on your investment. But then you have these guys. I love LeBron James, but he's in his 30s now. He gets hurt. He goes down
Yeah.
for a couple weeks, and you're
Hmm.
like, okay,
Hmm.
how do we get him back? So,
Yep.
all
Staying
these
healthy is hard.
expectations, staying healthy is hard. Recovery is huge, huge money
Yes.
in recovery, right? Huge money in the surgeries, all this stuff. I mean, when
Hmm.
I was a kid, if you did an ACL blowout, that was pretty much it for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now they go back in, from taking your classes. I took a great class at UCLA, biomechanics of musculoskeletal injuries class, where I learned
Ah,
about all
love
these
that.
different types of injury situations, how they happen, what happens to the bones, and these different types of fractures, avulsion fractures, and uh, what's this? One of my favorites is the ski top fracture, where they show people
Mm.
that their skis would slam into something,
Yep.
they
Yep.
go
Yep.
head over heels, and their boots would break their tibia and their fibula, right?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, that would be awful. And so, but it's happened enough to where actually has a name for it, and you
Yeah.
study it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this stuff is amazing. And they would show us these high resolution pictures of a cadaver, knee joint, that they just start pulling them apart, right?
Yep.
Under force, and you watch how they
Hmm.
break. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
so it does this, right? So, and loading, the speed of loading and all this, oh,
Hmm. Hmm.
amazing stuff, right? So,
Got access to a lot of information on the sports science now.
yeah. Oh, it's just like I said, but it's in your best interest to not only have your athletes trained and to move faster. I'm finding this interesting too. Like in the NFL this year, they've got a huge amount of injuries going right on,
Hmm. Mm.
now. And I keep thinking, I go, well, what's happened that's different? I go, well, they don't practice as much as they used to, but does that mean they're not tougher? And one of my coaches out here, Alan Hankel, shout out to Alan, who coached Doug Nordquist to 236 in the high jump. And, he was talking to me, he said, dude, everybody's so big and they're so fast and they're so strong. He goes, it's like your body's almost, they can't keep up.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
they're training them. It's almost like it happens too quickly, maybe,
Hmm.
to get the muscle density and the tendon strength and all that stuff. Because, let's face it, the muscles grow faster than the tendon
Yeah.
ligaments, right? So all of a sudden,
It takes a while to adjust to that. Like I know even when I was coming into college, like I dealt with shin splints for the first 2 years and they were painful. So
right?
incredibly painful. And just now I've gotten into like my first like year where I've been completely pain free in that sense. And it
Yeah.
did. It took such like a long time for it to adjust, but once it did, it's good.
Yeah. What did you do to get out of those, if you don't mind? My athletes, high
Yeah.
jumpers, are notorious for having bad shins. So I know what I do, and I
Yeah.
know what I have them do. But how did you? Because I know there's a lot of pounding on that takeoff at the
Yes,
end of the pole
definitely.
vault. So
Yeah, so that's actually I got shin splints very badly on my takeoff foot, so my left foot in this case. And we tried like the typical treatment options for it, right? Like icing and all like go foam roll your calves. Like I would get dry needling done. And despite doing like all that, and I was so diligent with it, like I just found that it didn't really work. So I kind of almost did like a factory reset. I went back, I like took a couple weeks off just to kind of let the inflammation go down. And then I started, and because like I'm an exercise science major, so I like to just kind of play around with things, right? Like I learned something in class, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm an athlete. Like I could kind of maybe test this on myself just out of curiosity. So
right.
I started doing some like very low level plyos, like, like ankle pogo, stuff like that for a pretty extended period of time. Like I want to say maybe like 1 to 2 months. So this was a very drawn out process, but like maybe like 1 to 2 months. I know during that time, like I was also kind of like using a little weight vest too to add maybe like 5 pounds here and there, so very slowly. And then once I kind of had built up tolerance with those lower level plyos that I was doing, that's when I kind of started to go into some of the higher intensity ones. And I found that over time, just kind of like how my body responded to that gradual stress, it just made it a lot stronger. So it was kind of counterintuitive in the sense like, oh, you're doing more plyos, like wouldn't that hurt it more? But I think if you do
Right.
it in the correct way, like it does kind of help you build up that tolerance to that
Yeah.
pounding on the tissue. Um, Second thing, I definitely looked at my run mechanics. I was toe striking a ton my first year, and then it again progressively got better as I kind of worked with the sprint coach and the
Yeah.
jumps coach, and they had eyes on my run mechanics. Um, and another thing was actually my spike choice too. So Rutgers is an Adidas school, so I jumped in Adidas for those first couple years, and I found that they just like for whatever reason I have a much higher rate of like knee pain, shin pain, ankle pain. So I ended up switching over to Nike spikes. So I currently
Yeah.
jump in Nike despite being an Adidas school. Like I have to tape over the logo and whatnot, but I
Right.
find that it does work a lot better for me, and
Yeah.
it's crazy to see how much of a difference it makes, but it does.
No, I agree with you. I hated Asics. No, no not Asics, Adidas. No offense, Adidas. Thank you for supporting track and field and the
Yes,
and
definitely.
everything, but I didn't have any success with Adidas either. And I was fortunate enough to jump my sophomore year, summer, I was there training on campus, and I met a
Hmm.
guy named Nat Page. Nat Page, if you're out there, he was a 7'7" jumper. Asics had him on, whatever they had their athletes on. He was one of their guys, and I was complaining to him about the shoes, about the Adidas shoes. And he reaches in his bag, pulls out a brand new pair of spikes with the, Velcro, the
Yeah.
Velcro. Oh, they were great. It's not like I can't tie shoes, but they were so cool. But they had Velcro over the tops. And then he was like, here, try these. And I was like, and he goes, no, just keep them. And I was like, I was blown away. He had extra pairs laying around, and I literally
Yeah.
jumped in those for like 2.5 years, and they
Hmm.
finally broke. Worst timing ever. They
Yeah.
broke 2 weeks before nationals.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. So what did I end up jumping in? Adidas
Adidas, of
from the
course.
school, right? Oh God, terrible timing. But anyway, yeah. So you're talking about that is great because not everybody is as interested in the biomechanics and all that stuff as you and I are, just because of the way our brains work. And then, some athletes are just gonna be like, how do I fix this? It's like,
Yeah.
I just want to know, like you
That's
said, I'll do the diligence part too. And the one thing I would add in on there for those of you listening out there, shameless plug, no motivation on my part because he's making millions of dollars doing his stuff. The knees over toes guy. If you've ever
Yeah.
seen him, his story is pretty amazing. And all the stuff that he champions, from the one-legged, little Poliquin squats for your knees, and then, the ankle work is all very solid. Like you said, anything that's going to strengthen the calf complex, starting, like you said, slow, low ranges of motion, going all the way through flexion, extension, and working through those things, some sleds, but you watch everything, it's usually slow and it's incremental. And that's
Yeah.
one of those
Yeah.
keys, because I think as human beings, it's just so hard for us to take our time, and
Hmm.
to really work through all the phases. It's like, no, I want to go from A to Z, boom. The faster I get there, the better. And it's like, I
Yeah.
keep
Injury.
telling people, yeah, you
That's
get
that's how
injured
you're
because,
rewarded with
yeah,
that.
those tissues just aren't ready. And
Yeah.
again, the muscles adapt faster. Why? Blood flow. Your
Yeah.
bones actually heal pretty quick. Your bones can adapt because if you're loading them, they have a rich blood supply. It's the
Hmm.
tendons and the ligaments that take forever because of that whole nutrient bath thing that
Yeah.
they're laying in. It's got this gel in there, which is nice for the movement, but it's really not so good at, moving nutrients around and removing waste and that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
It's like
Hmm.
you're just fighting a much slower battle, and you hear it all the time. People come
Yeah.
back and they go, yeah, I came back from ACL stuff. I came back from this, I came back from that. I had meniscus surgery, blah, blah, blah. And they go, I really wasn't right again. And sometimes it's like 18 months.
Yeah.
You hear that number all the time, year and a half, year and a half, year and a half. And it's like, before you can really even plant and push the way that you used to, where you knew you could do it. And now you're wondering if you can do it without it blowing out again. Right.
Yeah. That
Or
mental aspect of it too, of just knowing
yeah.
that you've injured it before. It's scary to go 100% again.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, there's a natural like, hey, wait a minute. Is this going to hold up? I know the surgery was good and I know I've done the rehab, right? But I don't know if it's going to handle these forces again. So yeah, it's a fascinating area. But so we got off on the track there. Coming back to the famous Chloe Timberg, because I'm so stoked to see young athletes like yourself just continue to improve, continue to get to these higher level meets. Like you said, you struggle through high school, you get to be a senior, you win state, you go into college. Now, last year we jumped right to the trials. How did you do? You said you finished behind the two twins at
Yes.
nationals and at the trials. Is that how that shook out?
No, so nationals, I ended up winning nationals, which was kind of an interesting bounce back because the year prior I actually no-highted at nationals. So there was definitely, I think it was definitely kind of like a some hesitation in my mind going into nationals because I was like, oh man, like this time last year, like I kind of crumbled under the pressure and I still really have no idea what happened. So it's tough to carry that with you to that same meet again the next year. No, I ended up winning nationals and then going into trials, like I said, finished seventh behind the Mall twins. But yeah, it was a fantastic year, very exciting. And I know earlier you had mentioned that like you were talking about kind of getting to that 7'2" point and how like up until that year, like you really hadn't even cleared 7 feet. And it was kind of the same thing. Like I had been chasing that 15-foot bar for a really, really long time. And I don't think I cleared 15 feet until that like this past March. And then, moving forward a couple months, I hit like 15.2 and then, again at nationals 15.5. So it's kind of like I feel like once you break that barrier once, you have so much more confidence in yourself to clear that
Mhm.
mark again and it kind of just all falls into place and you go on this just you have so much momentum to keep moving forward. So
Yeah, awesome. So, what's it going to take for you in 2028 to make the team and raise some ruckus here in LA?
yeah, I mean, you never know. I think a great example is, Sandy Morris, fantastic jumper. I think a lot of people thought she was going to make the team. Didn't end up making it just because, had an off day. So I think, you can have really good athletes that are super, super prepared and it just doesn't happen on the day. And it's a really disappointing thing, but it is part of the sport, unfortunately. So I guess all you can do is really just stick with what you've been doing. Hopefully surround yourself with the right people, which is why, I was planning on going back to my club coach just because I think that technique wise, it's going to be a really good change for me. I think that I haven't been a super technical vaulter for most of my career, you know what I mean? Like I kind of showed up to practice and I was just like, man, I want to jump. So I would just kind of like bullet down the runway, just like pure force. And there wasn't really a lot of thought of, oh, like maybe this would make your jump a little bit better if you could just like get this angle a little bit higher or do this a little bit sooner. And now I'm kind of able to step back and say, okay, like I see that these things are wrong and I really want somebody that's going to be able to kind of guide me in that sense. So that's kind of the reasoning behind the coaching change, just because I feel like that coach definitely resonates with that a little bit better.
Right.
Um, so I'm excited for that aspect of it for sure. But
Well,
I think too, just kind of mentally being able to hang on for 4 more years is really important as well.
yeah.
I'm a big, big advocate for just kind of like listening to yourself when you're training. So a lot of times, if I'm having a week where it's not even lacking the motivation, like maybe my body just isn't feeling good and I know that it's not a good idea to push it, I might say, okay, like maybe I'm gonna take a couple times where I just go and rock climb this week. And for a while that was really hard for me to do just because I felt like if I wasn't jumping and I wasn't sticking to the exact schedule that I created for myself, that I wasn't gonna make progress. But I think that like myself as an athlete, I respond much better to kind of listening to that. Both physically and mentally, because then I don't feel like I get as burnt out. I don't feel like track and field is taking over my life. I feel like I have like other
Right.
channels to kind of enjoy myself in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say those two are going to be really, really big and kind of training for the next 4 years.
Yeah. Well, and like you said too, if you depends, do you get a job? Are you quote unquote
Hmm.
professional,
Yeah.
working through that time period as a vaulter? What I
Hmm.
found interesting, from uh the journey there is, how do your body's going to change. This is the one thing I noticed too. Like I was
Yep.
hurt all the time in high school. I wasn't very flexible. I got to UCLA and the great coach Jim Bush told me I was one of the stiffest white men he'd ever seen. And I was like, thanks, coach. And instead of hanging my head and walking away in shame, I literally just started stretching more. And I was amazed to find out that my improved range of motion led to more speed and more power and some other things. And I wasn't getting hurt. I didn't pull my hamstrings or my quads like I had in high school. And now my only real problem was those lingering shin splints, which I had started down the road of fixing those. So, all of a sudden you're better. But I do remember still, and I see that same problem with the pole vault, the volume of jumps, like
It's a
are
lot.
just so dumb. We were so dumb. I look back, I'm like in high school, I think we jumped 4 days a week
Yeah.
without the meets. Without the meets, we jumped on Monday, we jumped on Tuesday. Wednesday was the day before meet, so we went light. Thursday we jumped. Friday we
Yeah.
went light because Saturday was an invite. But I'm thinking back, I'm like, that's still a lot of jumping. And even in college it was like that. So the one thing that I found as I got older, and now you had to have a job, your
Hmm.
other part of your life starts to intrude because you can't just hang out at college, which is cool, and take
Yeah.
classes and then, like Harry Potter, go play Quidditch. It's like, okay, so in the middle of all my classes, you're also a track athlete and you do that and you do your workouts. We
Yeah.
had to be done with our stuff by 2 o'clock every day, right? So all the kinesiology stuff, fortunately, was set early in the day and we get out to practice and do our thing. Well, once you're out of school, those rules don't apply. And it's a real
Hmm.
danger. You could easily overtrain, or you could find yourself in the boat of where it's hard to find the time to train because you have to have a job and survive.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of weird what you're talking about with me. I got to a place I was the same. Like I didn't like jumping anywhere near as much. I went completely the other direction. I
Hmm.
used to do technique jumping like once every 10 days.
Yeah.
Drag the pits out once every 10 days. The other days I'd be doing power, I'd be doing auxiliary strength, I'd be doing
Yep.
sprinting or plyos, but I wasn't necessarily high jumping, at high
Hmm.
levels because I
Yeah.
I didn't like the pounding,
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah. And this that I think with any event, there's definitely ways to kind of find an alternative route to getting better. Like obviously you still have to put in the work, but like with pole vault, for example, like you might be doing gymnastics 2 days a week instead of jumping. So that way, you're challenging your body and you're getting better at your event, but not necessarily in the sense of like, okay, I'm picking up a pole and going down the runway 5 days a week.
Right.
Or even just doing like little, pole stubby drills. So there's so much you can do that's not actually pole vaulting that will still help you get better. And I'm assuming
Yeah.
it's the same way with high jump and some of
Right.
the other events as well.
Yeah. I love listening to, I watch Curran and he's just classic because he's the laid back California surfer guy, and so the kids come running by him and he's always got his hands right on the low back and giving you the push into the plant. He's like, have a nice flight. Like, there you go.
Yeah,
Have a nice
yeah.
flight. He just cracks me up. And then I'd watch him doing drills with the pole, like you're saying. He's like, hey, do this when you rock back. It's like when you plant,
Mhm.
put your head over here. It's like going through these different things. And then I really like
Yep.
watching the guy, the Hootie pole vault guy.
Yeah, yep.
Um,
Team Hoop.
yeah. So
Good
Team
stuff.
Hoot Pole Vault. I love that stuff because he's gotten that brain that's literally broken it down sequentially.
Hmm.
You
Yep.
need to do this drill. You have to do this before you do this, and I'm learning more
Yes.
and more in the high jumps the same way. Like you can't really progress to this until you do this.
Yep. Yeah, yep.
So what was I going to ask you? There was something in there about the training aspect I like. And then, I think I was going to mention before you're talking about just charging down the runway. So I said, how much of that is your old gymnastics? Because you watch these young gymnasts when they're doing the vault, like at the Olympics, and they don't have great technique, right? But they're just like, they're just
Yeah, yeah.
falling down there and they're going to do this crazy stuff. It's like, I can see the mentality right now.
Definitely. I think it definitely depends on the athlete because I've actually recently gotten into coaching and like I have a couple of gymnasts and they're not always so just like bullet out the back. You know what I mean? Like they obviously have that athleticism and they're really like spatially aware, but it's not necessarily like um, it's not necessarily gymnastics related. I think that that's just always how I've been. You know what I mean? Like I'm super
Yeah,
competitive. I feel like I get super wired when I'm running. So my instinct is always just okay, like I'm gonna go 100% down this runway. Whereas now I'm learning, okay, like maybe you start at like 75 and you build up to 100% instead of
right.
so just kind of some changes like that. But I would say, yeah, definitely not gymnastics specific, but they have a ton of spatial awareness that they bring with them that I think is
Yeah.
extremely helpful. And obviously they're already really strong, so that does contribute to the success in pole vault.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the daredevil thing is something else, right? Because you really can't be a pole vaulter unless you've got a little bit of crazy. Let's be honest.
Yes, yeah.
You got
That
to
is
be.
something my coach loves to say. So you have to be a little bit insane to be a pole vaulter.
Well, I mean, most people,
Definitely
when they
agree.
look at it, they go, okay, you're actually flipping upside down, right? And you're shooting straight up in the air with your feet.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you do a flip and you come down. I fell in love with it too. I did it my sophomore year at Millikan High School. We were
Mhm.
a 3-year high school. So that was the first time I'd seen the pole vault, and the poles were just laying around. We didn't even have a coach, as I
Yeah.
remember. There was one guy that was a year in front of me whose dad, Dave Tomlinson, his dad's Dick Tomlinson. I think he was a coach of pretty high repute. So Dave was really good. So I'd watch him, and then nobody was ever like, hey, you do this, you do that. My school of vaulting was just watch and copy as best you could.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I loved it. I almost gave up high jumping for pole vaulting. I'd been high jumping for 3 or 4 years already in junior high before I got to high school, and I'd never seen
Mhm.
pole vault. But yeah, I loved it. I thought it was just like, oh, this is just too much fun. I could see
Yeah.
the addiction to it. But again, we never had a coach. So I did it my
Yeah.
senior year, and I think I vaulted 11.6 or something. But I was like, I always wanted to try it with somebody like Anthony, and then I ended up coaching it
Mhm.
on my own. But I just
Yeah.
go and watch his clinics, and I started learning. I'm just like, this is an amazing event. All the
Yeah.
field events are like that. I found it interesting what you said, Chloe, about how you got your shin splints to go away. You were doing plyometrics, but you started low. So let me
Yep.
explain to our listeners that for this, I've seen a lot of this on these different feeds, like the low intensity, uh, 2-footed hops, say in the sand, right? Just real low, and maybe you're getting 3 or 4 inches off the ground, right? But boom, 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 and you're getting that loading, but you're not killing yourself, and you're just stretching, 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 pound, 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 but it's soft, right? Boom. And I like that because you go, yeah, what do you do from there? Like you said, well, the intensity goes up a little, but you do this for a while so that your body has adjusted and it's easy. It's like,
Mhm.
getting people to train at their heart rate. You go, hey, I've been doing a lot of research on this because I just turned 60. Oh my God, I'm going to be 61 here pretty soon already. And I'm like, what should I be training at? And there's this guy that I follow, Brad Kearns, and he's, this guy that used to be a triathlete. And so he was a kind of like the gymnast crazy, full blast, everything, or whatever. He was like endurance. Everything was endurance, you had to run a lot, you had to bike a lot, you had to swim a lot. And so
Mhm.
he's found as he's gotten older, he's like, I want to stay in shape, but I can't do that same kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And he's done
Yeah.
all the research. And he's going, hey, we got to find, the best way to get your exercise 180 minus your age. You work out at that rate or less, and you'll
Mhm.
burn fat and you'll be a happy
Yep.
person. So I'm like, I'm trying to find, how to do that. And I find that, that if that's the high end, how do you slowly build up, right, to
Mhm.
that? So
Mhm.
it's like, and I see that in everything. Like you said, you can either take the pole and charge down the runway right away. What if it's only 6 feet in the air? Are
Yeah.
you really going to go full blast and pole vault over at 15 feet, and the bars, let's say it's a 10, you're 5 feet over. You're like, what's the value in that, right? So it's like, I've taught the kids too, and my high jumpers, I'm like, look, all the key is acceleration. So if you can go like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8,
Progressively get
like that,
faster.
that
Peak at
progression,
the end of your jump, not the beginning.
yeah, right. That progression might only be good for like 4, 6, but I'm
Yep.
like, you have to learn the pattern. You have to learn how to have a controlled acceleration, and then as you get going, you can keep going up. But like you said, at 70% speed, you can probably vault, 13 feet or something, and then at 75%, and it's going to go up. And as the bar goes up, I keep telling you got to get faster. You
Yep.
got to get a little bit farther away. All those same things, come through. So let's finish up. What is your just hit us with goals for this year? It's your senior year at Rutgers. You've got indoor and out both, right? You can get both
Yes.
seasons
Yep.
in. So
Yep.
you got
Yep.
indoor and
Yep.
outdoor goals, and then are there world championship goals? Like, what does it take? How close are you to being able to compete at that? Because to me, Olympic trials is obviously elite and world level. So nobody's heard that yet. You're definitely there, because if you make the team, you had the Olympic qualifying height too, I'm assuming, right? So you're ready to go, or would
Yeah. Yeah. I think so.
So you make the team in the top three and you've got Olympic height, you're competing against other people in the world. So there's the shock of the Olympics if you've never seen those guys before. There's the US nationals, right? Where you're not just the collegiate nationals, but now,
Yeah.
the elite level nationals and all that. So anyway, with that background, what do you see happening this year, and what's your goals for, say, this year up through the next four?
Yeah, I mean, I think this year, one of my biggest goals was just to kind of get comfortable in that elite setting. You know what I mean? And I wanted to kind of work on my mentality of like feeling like I do belong there, because I think that one of the worst things you can do is show up to a meet and feel like you don't belong, because it takes out like so much of your confidence when you're about to compete. Um, so we've arranged like a couple meets. Like I know I'll be at Millrose this year. There's another one that we're going to in Akron that's going to have a couple other like elite vaulters. So just kind of like surrounding myself with those people and those women in the sport a little bit more. So that way, not only can I learn from them and how they carry themselves, because I really do look up to them, just starting to feel comfortable with like, hey, you do belong here. And like, you are working just as hard as they are. You deserve to be here. And, just getting comfortable in an environment like that and that level of competition. So that's kind of like step one. Um, as far as collegiate goals go, I'd really, really like to kind of jump when I know I can at nationals, both indoor and outdoor this year. So, hopefully becoming more consistent kind of at that 15-foot mark, maybe even consistent over a 15.5 mark, because I do see a lot of changes that are happening in practice, and like I'm antsy to get going with the season, but I know
Right.
that, still have some more things to work on. Um, and then I think just kind of like after graduation, honestly, staying healthy and staying in love with the sport, because I don't want to burn out before those 4 years hit. And really just kind of becoming more engaged in the track and field community. Like I feel like for a lot of my career, I haven't really known a lot about track and field. And I think that like my junior and senior year at college, like I finally started to kind of like lock into that. Coaching it is a whole different perspective on it. So
Yeah.
I'm starting to kind of just appreciate the track and field community more, and especially, like the pole vault community, just because that's what I'm surrounded with a lot. So, kind of just soaking up as much information from different coaches as I can, and learning, just how to be involved in that. And then,
Yeah.
height wise, I guess like a goal for myself that I'm hoping for is to kind of be at that like 15.7, 15.8 mark. And, if it's higher, great, but definitely somewhere around there. So.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned a couple of things in there. I like you, whether we were opened up the subject or not, but the mental
Yeah.
aspect of competing, feeling that you belong at that next level, which is so hard. I mean, for those of
Mhm.
you out there that are listening, it's like you may have a goal to get to a certain level. And I can remember, you know, pretty much in junior high, I used to win all the time, like whatever
Yeah.
the grade level was. And then in high school, my sophomore year, for some reason, I still don't understand. They left me down at Frosh Soft. I was jumping 6'2" already. And I was like, I knew there were other schools where their varsity guys were jumping 6 feet or 6'2". I was like,
Mhm.
how come I'm not? And we only had one really good guy in varsity that I remember. And I was like going, how come I'm not up? It was like, okay. So that was the goal, was to get up there. And then my junior year, I got to the first time Arcadia out here is a huge high school invitational meet. And I jumped 6'8" literally the day before the meet. And my coaches called and they got me in. And I was like, I'm there the next day like this, like looking around, there's bright lights, and there's all these guys
Like,
that I
wow, it's kind of
yeah,
a
their
shock.
marks are in the
It
paper.
really
There's
is
like
a shock.
7-footers in the field, and I'm like, dude, I just had a massive PR to get here. So I
Yeah.
kind of had that, like you're saying, the mindset was all wrong, but I didn't think I could win, and I couldn't win. I was just happy to show up. And then the opening height was 6'4", which I'd never even opened at before. And so I
Mhm.
made opening height, and I was like, dang, I made 6'4", cool.
Mhm.
And I'm like a little kid walking around with my autograph book going, hey, you're Mike Powell. Ends up
Yeah.
being the world record over the long jump.
Yeah.
Wow, you jumped in 7'1". Oh man, you're amazing. And then the next year I came back, and my senior year, when I walked out there, I wanted to win. I was there
Yeah.
to win that then. I wasn't
Mhm.
walking around happy to be there. It was like in one year, my mindset had completely changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that what you're saying is having the ability to foresee that, look ahead, and know that too is important. And then I always think the earlier
Really
you can
important.
get to these higher levels,
Mhm.
better, because I still think probably 9 times out of 10, most people are going to just get the deer in the headlights
Yeah.
the first
Yeah.
time at that next level, because it's just, it's
Definitely.
just that. It's just that next level. It's hard to, assimilate. Every once in a while, you get someone who just either seems blissfully unaware
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
is complete out of their mind, and they do well at that next level, even without having ever
Yeah.
been there before, which is
Mhm.
always fun to see. But
And I remember like even freshman year when I walked to my first Big Tens, like I was really nervous because there were girls that were jumping like 14.3, 14.5 really consistently. I'm like, man, like I've been jumping 13.6 consistently this year, and that's all fine and great, but like these girls are the real deal. So I feel like there's kind of like a different form of it at each level you get to. There's always going to be someone that you're like, wow, like I don't feel like I belong here because this person's so like at another level. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. Well, that's, having the wisdom to recognize that, and I love the way your outlook is. You've got a good grounding. You've got your biomechanics on one side. You've got good training, and you seem to have wisdom beyond your years. You're like, okay, I don't want to overtrain. Maybe I'll go do some rock climbing. Maybe I
Yeah.
can disassociate every once in a while, and stay healthy. And you've got a healthy dose of when the chips are down, I can still go for it. Full
Hmm.
blast with
Yeah.
that, the gymnast mindset of I'm just going to blast, but you're refined enough to, pick up your finer technique points. And the other, I think the depth, I do wish that I had maybe competed for a little bit longer. I did start coaching and still competing. So by the time 92 rolled around, I was 28. I took my last shot at making it to the trials, and had been coaching for 3 or 4 years already.
Hmm.
And that did add a little depth, but I was still very, very early in my career and hadn't really thrown myself into it. I was just kind of
Hmm.
doing it. I was
Yeah.
coaching kind of to make a little money and kind of just to stay afloat. And then it was like, and I was training still too, but like I said, it's that weird quasi land after college where,
Hmm.
and I
Hmm.
wasn't anywhere near the level that you're on where you've already been to the trial. So, there's a lot of amateur athletes out there that after college are just kind of in this
Yeah.
really fuzzy wasteland where
Hard to get support at that
yeah,
level too.
support, place to train, right? Uh, Coaching, all that stuff costs time and money. So, well, hey, Chloe, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule with your indoors looming here pretty soon.
Yes.
And it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. The first time I saw your feed, I was like, oh, she just looks so happy. She's just going full blast. And, congratulations on all the great accomplishments. Hearing that you made it to the trials is just like, I'm like, yes, love it. I love it. I'm like your biggest fan. I can't wait to see 4 years,
Thank you. Thank you.
hear your name at the top of the list of the top three, see you representing the US here in Los Angeles would be amazing. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you so much for having me. This was great. I really like talking through it all.
yeah, yeah. Well, I reserve the right to ask you again, and maybe instead of the whole general interview and finding out about you, then we can, if you're into it, we could do the technical stuff. As a matter of fact, we almost rushed
Absolutely.
off without looking at you in action. So let's show everybody. I'm going to share screen with you for a second. I'm glad we went through that. And we're going to go desktop and share. Okay, and I've got this all queued up. So I don't know how big it is on your end, but this is as big as I can get it. So I'm gonna have
Yeah.
to work on this. So here is Chloe Timberg crashing down the runway. I love this indoor facility. Is this like a big airplane hangar that you guys are working at? What is this?
It is like legitimately an inflatable bubble. We call it the bubble.
Yeah,
We don't have like a permanent indoor facility, so it's kind of like we share. It's a practice facility for football, and it has a track along the outside of it.
right,
So our pole vault pit just kind of runs along the back side of it, and then
right,
yeah, just inflatable walls. It's very interesting.
right. Okay, awesome. Well, it's got a high ceiling, if nothing else.
Yes, yeah,
Okay. So here you are exploding through your takeoff. I noticed that your right arm is straight overhead. I've been hearing a lot about this. And it looks like both arms are completely straight. I don't see that lead arm collapsing, which is a big problem for many, right? So you've got
yeah.
this locked out, both arms straight.
Hmm.
That looks awesome. So I'm gonna let you talk. I'm a total nascent follower here. So here she is. I love the cycling. So you can see the work you've done with your coaches because your feet are kicking you in the butt every step, which much longer stride length. The knees are up,
Yeah.
and
One of my biggest
yeah.
issues with my jump is like, especially in those last couple steps, I get super stridey. I don't know what it is. I have a really hard time with, I guess, like spatial awareness when I'm running and the
Mhm.
perception of it. Like, I can tell within like 4 inches if I'm going to be outside of the 10-foot takeoff mark. So, one of the biggest things we've worked on this year is getting comfortable taking off a little bit closer to like 11 feet. And the idea there is that hopefully, if I take up enough jumps with it at the 11-foot mark, like maybe that will translate to a meet setting and I can hold a little bit higher. So I
Yes,
definitely like, I have the speed to do it. It's just I'm so uncomfortable with it mentally that I like a lot of times I'll kind of bail on the jump if I'm too
yeah,
far out.
right.
Even though 11 feet is probably where I should be taking off. So that's actually why you see the towel there. It's kind of like it's a little bit of a visual so I know like okay like this is my reminder that I need to start turning my steps over a little bit more so that I end up behind that towel instead of in front of it, and then
Right,
over time we kind of start to take that away so that
right.
you don't become too dependent on it, and obviously like in a meet setting you're not going to have that.
Yeah. Well, it's tough too, because you talk about where to take off from it. In the high jump, one of my huge pet peeves with my kids, I keep telling them, I'm like, look, I went through a long time in my career before I managed to hook up with this coach at Long Beach City College. His name was Baru Elias. He's a little Romanian guy, thick Romanian accent. And he was coaching two guys that had jumped 7'8", and he was a good long triple and high jump coach.
Yeah.
And I was just like Luke Skywalker seeing Yoda. Like I just what he said, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. I learned all about cycling, and a lot of different, things from Elias. And one of the first things he said was, when the bar goes up, you have to get farther away from it.
Yeah.
And nobody had
Yeah.
ever taught me that. Nobody had ever taught me that. All those years I'd high jumped, I was like, I don't understand. And I would watch people that would run and let's say somebody's having a great day and they're just boom, they keep making jumps on the first jump. And you can see they go PR, another PR, and the bar goes up and everything's clicking. There's no reason for anything to change. And you can see when they're going, all of a sudden the bar's at a new height and they're still just boom, they're confident, they're bouncing,
Yeah.
boom. They come right up and they go crash and they're right into the bar and everything. And you see them come up out of the pit with this look on their face like, what the hell just happened?
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, your coach didn't tell you to back up. That's all I did. I'm like,
Yeah.
you were too close. As the bar goes up and you start running faster, you're gonna blow through a little bit more,
Mhm.
So it's like you
Yeah.
got to get
Yeah.
farther away. So the interesting thing about that is I've been battling this now for a couple years, in this last 5 or 6 years with kids, and I'm like, I used to try shock value, which I've likened to the idea of throwing a frog into a hot water pot, where you just go, look, you need to move a foot farther out.
Yeah.
You move a
Yeah.
high jumper a foot farther out, they'll just bail. They'll run
Yeah.
up and they'll start diving into the bar because they don't believe that they
Yes.
can hit vertical and get in there. They think it's too
That
far,
is exactly how I feel as I'm
right?
running down the runway.
So and that's why I'm bringing that up. So I realized that the way to teach them is the exact opposite. It's like, how do you
Mhm.
cook a frog in a hot water pot? You put them in there when it's lukewarm and you
Yeah.
slowly heat it up, right?
Yep.
And as you're
Find a happy
slowly,
medium.
slowly turning up the heat, they're sitting there going, hey, this is pretty nice. And then it's like, oh, this is like a nice warm bath. And it's like, hey, it's like a jacuzzi, and then all of a sudden they're cooked.
Mhm.
They can't get out, so it's like, it's the same thing. I just go, look, when you move back this time, move back a centimeter. I'll just
Yeah.
have them move back a centimeter. And after a
Yeah.
while, they'll still be coming up. And sometimes they're hitting it on the way up and hitting it with their heads. I'm like, how much did you move back? They're like, just a little bit. I go, okay, let's move back a centimeter more. So it's
Yeah.
not overwhelming, where it's not, because sometimes what you're saying doesn't always translate to them. I'll tell them, I go, look, I'll hold my fingers this far apart. I go, move this much back. And I watch them. They go back this much. You're like, not 2 feet, 2 inches.
Nice. A
Like, so
little
now
bit.
I'm erring on the other side. I'm going, let's just go a centimeter at a time until you realize that
Yes. Yeah.
there's more there, right? All right. So walk us through here. The plant, what's the most important thing as you're planting now that we've got you at the right spot
Yeah.
and you're happy with that?
Getting your arms up is definitely the biggest thing. Like I think I have a very typically my plant is very late. So because I have a lot of strength, like a lot of times I am able to fight it off. But if you were really breaking it down from a technique perspective, like your right hand would want to be up here and completely straight, maybe like a frame or two before.
Right. So yours a little
Um,
bit forward, you're saying?
yeah, a little bit forward, and I also have a tendency where I kind of like plant out in front of me. So instead of coming up right next to my ear, sometimes it
Yeah.
will kind of come out here and then get hit back like this. So
Right.
it's almost like a two-phase plant. And like I think this video was actually one of my better days with this technical cue. So it's definitely like this is considerably better than it usually is, where my right arm is coming up and it's immediately getting to this position here, as
Right.
opposed to like hitting forward and then getting hit back. So it's
Okay.
definitely it's a lot to think about as you're coming in, because your legs are moving, they're doing one thing, your arms are doing something completely different. And then, at the same time you got to think, okay, like now it's time to swing so that I actually end up getting upside down.
Right.
Yeah.
How important is it? I always find there's a lot of fascinating things about pole vault that I think are kind of high jump related. Like I teach
Hmm.
my athletes to try to leave that knee up, when they
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
high jump. I'm like, drive your knee up and just leave it up there and let it
Yeah.
ride. It looks to me like that knee never does anything after you do that. You actually pull it up to your chest, swing your feet up, and I know it's a lot easier to do that than if your legs were straight. Because the longer
Yeah.
your legs are, it take forever to swing them and rock all the way back, right? So
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
first one, since it's bent that high, is easy to get it
Yeah.
to rock. You can see the other leg has to catch up, right, from the bottom
Yes.
as you plant.
So that's a really big thing in pole vault, is that like a lot of coaches will cue you want to keep your trail leg really long, right? Because that kind of like whip of the leg through is what's going to give you that momentum to actually get upside down. So like if you have a
Right?
lazy trail leg and it kind of just hangs out back there and then it just like kind of casually comes up to your chest, you're not
Yeah,
going to get inverted as fast. So they really do tell you like try and make that trail leg long and then really kind of kick it through to help you gain that speed. But pole is interesting in the sense that you can do a lot of different, like there are a lot of different technical versions. So some coaches might say, okay, like a tuck and shoot where you curl up into a ball and then like launch off the top. Like some people think that that's the most effective way to jump.
right,
Others might say, no, I want you to keep that leg long for as long as possible and then try and like bring your legs up like I do. So I don't do a tuck and shoot. I do kind of like more of like a
right.
traditional pole vault, I guess you could say. Um, some people, I know you had mentioned before too, like that kind of left arm at the plant where it's supposed
Yeah,
to like come out here and stay straight. Some people actually now will let that hit in and then they'll push it back out and then break it back down. And like
right.
a great example, that if you look at like Molly Caudry's jump, she's from Great Britain, like she just jumped extremely high and she kind of does the same thing where it collapses and then pushes
Yeah,
back out, but she jumps like high 15s, close to
yeah,
16 feet with that. So it's really flexible. You kind of just have to find whatever works best for you. And I guess
right.
depending on like what your strengths are is going to kind of determine what type of jump you should do. So if you
Yeah,
have the speed, like some people might choose to do a more traditional vault, versus like if you're a little bit slower, like you might want to do that tuck and shoot just so that you get more time to kind of curl up and invert.
right. I got a question for you here. This is just me. I'm one of those people that learns just by looking at body positions and angles. Like for my high jumpers, I'm trying to get them to where their head, their shoulder, their hips are all on the same level. Like you see the
Yeah.
figure behind me is starting to throw their head, but it's going down instead of towards the plane
Mm,
bar, right? So here I notice you're here and then your legs are going up kind of like an L, but
yeah.
then you continue to shoot your hips. So your hips are coming up and now we're getting close to where you were here before and now you're going vertical, right?
Yeah.
So question I have is we can't go completely truly vertical because if you go straight up and come straight down, you can land in the box, right? So
Yeah.
you gotta go through a little, but like the goal here, you can see you completely extended here. And I keep telling
Yeah.
all my athletes this, I'm like, all of your power is in complete extension. If there's anything short here and there, it might be quicker because it's shorter, as far as
Yeah.
covering distance, but it's going to lack the complete power at the finish. So you can see this extension through here and bam, right as you shoot your hips right there, you're straight and you're going to continue
Yeah.
on that line through the air after that, right? Okay.
So a really important part of this jump too, if you look at like where Walter lands in the pit, so you can see like I'm kind of landing, I would say like mid pit, like kind of like right in the center of that R,
Yeah.
right? So ideally, like you want to find a pole that's gonna kind of put you, I guess, at the beginning of like where that white line is, or like somewhere
Right.
kind of in that area as opposed to back further. So this particular jump, like my pole was a little bit too small, but because I was working on some technical cues, like
Yeah.
I'd
So
rather
you just
work on
mushed
a
out the
smaller
pole.
pole and
Yeah.
feel confident about it and not have to worry, like, okay, like I have to put every single ounce of effort into making sure that I take this jump up with this giant pole. So
Yeah.
kind of I'm like, yeah, most practices I'll use a relatively small pole just to go through those technical cues and kind of flow through it a little bit better.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a really big one. And I definitely like, especially in this, so that's why I launch a little bit more like through as opposed to up and
Up.
over. But
Right. So
um
you just blew through your pole, basically.
yeah, I blew through my pole, and another big thing too is that I noticed that in practice, my jumps, like I guess this is consistent for a lot of people, but my timing is just a lot later in practice. I don't know if that's just because I'm visualizing a bungee, but like as soon as a bar goes up, I actually turn much sooner, and it gives me a much more vertical
Yeah.
trajectory.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Okay. Because right
So
there
it
you're
definitely
turning.
like how I execute my jump changes a lot from a practice session to, when the bar
Yeah.
goes up.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a couple of things that you mentioned there. That the whole, for those of you that are just listening the first time to the Sky High and Fly, our podcast here, Raise the Bar. This whole idea of I listen every time I listen to Anthony talk to people about, it's like, okay, you got to get another poll. So this is where if you have never listened to this before, it's kind of mind-boggling, but it's like, and I had actually done the event, at least in a rudimentary form, but he's like, okay, I want you to get the bigger pole. So he's telling these high school kids, go to the shed, get this pole, bring it back out, move back 2 feet, do
Yeah.
this. It's like a
Yeah,
boom, boom,
there's a
boom, boom,
lot, a
boom.
lot of adjustments.
A lot of adjustments. Like, and he's doing it almost like it's, just like
Yeah.
tying your shoelaces. Like he's just like, okay, do this, boom,
Yeah.
boom, boom. Because they've got another 5 or 6 volts before they're going to go again. But
Yeah.
he's already spotted, okay, we got to get you on this next pole, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So that's a whole area that's just fascinating. I think you could write volumes on that alone, knowing how to manipulate through there, when's the
Yes.
right time to switch,
Pole,
what
I was gonna
are you trying to get
say, pole
accomplished.
decisions are huge. And I think pole science is kind of it's getting more and more interesting. So I jump on Essex poles now. I used to jump on Pacer poles, but even from like a brand perspective, right? Like they have a flex number up at the top, and then there's like a load cell number. And from those, like, there's just so many different numbers on the poles that kind of help you make that decision. So
Yeah,
like, okay, like if the flex is higher on this pole, it's going to be softer versus if you like go down in
right.
flex number, it's going to be a lot stiffer. But then you might have two poles that have the same exact flex number, but their load cell number is different. And so one pole is actually softer than the other. So it's like there's so
Yeah,
many different numbers that you have to pay attention to. It's a
right.
lot of different details.
Yeah, the poll decisions I find is just a fascinating,
Yeah.
part of everything.
Yeah.
And then what was the other thing here? Um, you were mentioning, oh, I just think that the difference between, practice and competition is just that. It's like that's the one thing I'll tell the kids. I'm like, look, you can't PR every day.
Yeah.
If you
Definitely.
were, you'd be world champ in the next 3 months and you could retire. So, you have to operate at a level that you can, get the technique right. So this comes back to your talk earlier about the plyos, and I've been extending this thought. It's not really a new thought, but it's the first time I've
Mhm.
started attacking it this way, which is everything's on a continuum
Yeah.
from slow to fast. So as you're training, the one thing I was taught by my golf swing guru, shout out to Mike McNary, who's one of the most amazing golf swing coaches I know. But he would tell me, look, if you can't do it slow, you can't do it fast. He was
Yeah.
talking about joint positions and angles and everything. He'd be like, I want you to cock the club. I want you to load your arms straight. I want you to do this, and it would be like step by step, incremental, really, really slow. Check your positions and then go through like perfectly through there. And it's like, and then I would get set and he'd go, okay, now swing. And I'd be like, what do you mean? I can't swing. I just sitting
Mhm.
here, and he's like, you got to be able to go from there.
Yeah.
So it's like, I've learned that works for everything from warming up to running, sprinting, everything else is like, instead of just jogging a couple laps and doing some mobilities, blah, 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 and then just going full blast, I'm like, no, let's do the A drills at 10%. Let's do the A
Break it down
at
a little bit.
30%, do it at 70%, pick it
Yeah.
up. And then so you go from slow to fast on each thing. And when it comes to really, really fast, it's hard to do that in workout
Mm-hmm.
because in
Mm-hmm.
workout, it's just you.
Yeah.
It's you and your body. Now, if you have the luxury of having a couple other pretty good vaulters in there, you might start to get a little competitive and get the
Yeah.
competitive juices going, blah, blah, blah. But still, in the part of your mind, it's still just a
Yeah.
practice, And I always tell the kids, I go, the difference between meet and practice is meets are like practices on adrenaline. It's
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
adrenaline
Exactly. The
adds a
adrenaline makes a
whole other
huge
level.
difference.
And you don't know from practice really how to operate at those really crazy levels. So you're trying to get as close to those levels as you can. But
Mm-hmm.
and the other thing, like we were talking about before with the overtraining problem, is you just can't get that many of those reps in. So
Yeah.
you really
Yeah.
be paying attention as you do them. Otherwise, you're just wasting them.
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's
Oh,
true.
wasted opportunities. Well, hey, Chloe, again, thanks for sharing your time, your video with us. Big fan of you. I like the your whole outlook. It seems like you're getting the whole team aspect, but you're the team. So yeah, you're lucky enough to have a great coach and pole vault community. That was the other thing. If we ever get the chance talking about the pole vault community, that's something that it's unique. It's
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
I don't know that I'm sure the shot put discus thing is kind of the same because they're always over there by themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're not
Mm-hmm.
usually out on the track. The pole vault here, when I was exposed to that for the first time, I was amazed that everybody, even though you're competitive and you're fighting against
Yeah.
each other, they're like a
Very
big
friendly. Extremely
everybody.
friendly.
I've seen people share poles, right? Somebody breaks a pole and they're like, I don't have
Mm-hmm.
another pole. And somebody else is like, hey, I got one here,
Yeah.
and it's an amazing community. So, but again, I reserve the right if you ever find the time as we get going through the season, maybe we'll do a check-in with Chloe, see how indoors going, see how training's going, and just like let us know what is the current
Yeah.
atmosphere there
Yeah.
at Rutgers.
Absolutely. I would love that. But thank
All
you so
right.
much for having me today. This was great.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a treat. So
Yeah.
you have a great time training. Stay healthy. Take care of all the stuff you got to take care of,
Thank
and
you so
just
much.
keep raising that bar. All
Thank you. Take care.
right, Chloe. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
And that's going to wrap it up for us here on another episode of Raise the Bar. Again, I'm your host, Troy Haynes. It's been just a kick to talk to Chloe Timberg. She's a senior at Rutgers University on the East Coast. It's in New Jersey. We just had UCLA and USC play them in football these last 2 weeks. I believe they came out to the West Coast and lost both games, but they're fun to watch. And she is a kick. She's very fun. She's got a great following on Instagram. She has already won a national title in the pole vault and made it to the Olympic trials last year, where she came in seventh. She's got great goals this year to perform well at both indoor and outdoor in her senior year at Rutgers, and then is on the long path to try to make it to again to the Olympic trials in 2028 here in Los Angeles, and the Olympics as well. I'm not sure where the trials are going to be held. Actually, I shouldn't say LA. I kind of assume the Coliseum, but who knows? It may be up in Oregon again, or maybe even at Mount San Antonio College. Those are some great venues that we have here in the U.S. But the Olympics for sure are 2028 in Los Angeles, and it'd be great to see Chloe there. So keep your eyes and ears open for her, an up and comer for sure. She's only 21 and is continuing to grow in her abilities. So we look forward to hearing more about her. And until our next podcast, you never know what is going to catch my curiosity and get to talk to someone. We will be back here with another episode of Raise the Bar before you know it. So keep listening. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button down at the bottom that you see there here on YouTube. And you can also find the Raise the Bar podcast if you'd like to listen in your car. It's Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We're on a couple different platforms. So there we go. Until next time, this is Troy Haynes signing off. Thanks for listening.